Hello. Hi,
Hi,
my name is Pat,
I'm Barb.
and we have a lot of really interesting conversations, and we thought that we might share them with you and just for our own enjoyment, and you might learn something and we might learn something. And so for this very first podcast, which we haven't figured out a name for yet, we are going to talk about ambivalence. And the reason that we're going to talk about ambivalence is because this came up in a conversation that Barb and I had last week when we were talking about this podcast idea. And that we both had pretty strong experiences with ambivalence and how it affects a lot of our decisions. And when we were talking about doing some research, and Barb, you said that you'd been doing a little research. What did you find?
Well, I found that after looking up some stuff, I realized that I myself am an ambivalent person and actually live with ambivalence just about all of the time, actually, from what I have found out. So I realized that and not only myself, but other members of my family, people I know, like it really made it clear that a lot of the way that I feel that's what it is. It's ambivalence.
So
So
what did you read that that said, oh my gosh, that's me?
well, probably the very first thing is, okay, just a minute here. It's like ambivalence is a state of having simultaneous conflicting reactions, beliefs, or feelings towards some object. So I've always thought that I was kind of a neutral person, and that I could, in a conversation or a discussion, see both sides of the conversation. And what I realize now is that could be true to some extent, but a lot of it is just ambivalence about making a decision.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So even if you're listening to someone and they say this and somebody else says this, you think, oh, I'm really good at listening to both arguments.
Exactly.
But you're saying you have having trouble picking a side, sort of thing.
Yes, because I would feel very ambivalent about picking a side, because then what would the other person think? Would I be confronted in some way? This way, it's very, very safe. And I have, like, for instance, it's also a way of protecting yourself. It's like it says it's like an insurance policy. It could make things, let's see, although ambivalence can help protect us against rejection, if we're ambivalent and we get what we want, then we don't feel good about it. That actually doesn't talk about what I was talking about. But anyways, and it's also feeling conflicting feelings at the same time. Like, for instance, in a relationship, perhaps maybe you have feelings of love and also hate,
Yeah.
towards a person. So you have very ambivalent feelings towards that person.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing.
That's an interesting way to describe that, because when it almost encompasses a kind of stress,
Yes.
because some of the stuff that I was reading was saying that, that when you have both positive and negative opinions about someone at the same time, and you're kind of stretching this elastic a little bit, because you're trying to keep in that neutral zone, like you described it, and you're kind of creating stress for yourself, because
Yes.
your positive and your negative feelings about someone or something are actually the conflict itself.
Yes. It causes a lot of anxiety, and it's yes, that is true. That actually causes the conflict itself. So now I looked up, like, what could cause that? What could cause a person to be ambivalent? Why is someone like that? And just trying to find what I found here. It was something about not being, see if I can find it here, about not being taught coping skills.
Mhm.
As let's see if I can find this.
You mean as a kid?
As a kid, yes.
Yeah.
See if I can find it here.
Well, while you're looking for that, that brings up another interesting point, because I think that when you dig deep enough into almost anything, you find some fear.
Yes.
And then you say, well, what's the fear about? Because, you know, sometimes these ambivalent situations they're certainly not life or death. But there's a little bit of fear, and the fear seems to me to often be, am I capable, or do I have enough resources to actually deal with this thing? You know, where you're kind of taking it on from the fear level at a personal, can I do this? Can I make a choice?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Can I, you know, like you say, can I stand up to what choice I made? Can I
exactly
defend it? And
yes.
am I going to be cornered about it? And do I have, you know, so that at some level, it seems to come back to kind of self-esteem issues in a way. Like, am
yes.
I, you know, I don't know.
I would agree with that, because if you're not taught those skills, then you wouldn't have any confidence in that at all.
Yeah.
Like if you were kind of like silenced or not given the opportunity growing up to make a case, to express, even just to express how you're feeling. And if you're not able to do that, then you grow up not even knowing if you can, and then you have to either learn it on your own, or you stay in that ambivalent state.
Yeah, well, because that's a good point, because you might not even know it's ambivalence.
Yes.
It would maybe even feel like a safe zone. Well, if I don't say anything, if I don't disagree with anybody, or if I don't pick a side, then nobody can bonk me on the back of the head, you know, while I'm not looking.
That's right. That's actually a good way of putting it, a safe zone. Because for myself, I'm recalling, you know, a lot of times, you know, when you have the kitchen table conversations and the families gathered around and stuff, that's exactly what I would do, and I would feel safe there. And, you know, I always thought that it was because I could see both points of view. And to some extent, I still feel that way.
Yeah.
I still feel that I was able to do that. But I now, you know, believe that that's exactly what I was doing. I was staying in the safe zone. There's no confrontation there. Don't have to pick a side. Don't have to defend a side. No. I'm safe right here. And I'll just put it out there that, well, you know, I can see both sides I can see both sides.
I have wings.
I'll just stay here.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I can very much relate to what you're saying, because I mean, I remember as a smaller child, or small child period, that if you disagreed with somebody, it always was personal. You know, like, how can you disagree with me? You know, that kind of thing. And so there was a sort of you came to think or believe that when you got off the fence and said something, that you know, you've hurt somebody's feelings, or you've made them angry, or now they're angry at you for this thing you said that hurt them. And you learn a kind of silence, you know, about your own opinion about things, because if it hurts people and they're angry at you, then you feel rejected, and you almost kind of disappear.
Yes.
Yourself, because if you say too much to too many people, you know, if this one thing is that upsetting, this other thing must be really upsetting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, I know for myself, I learned a kind of silence about expressing my opinion, because although you wouldn't know that about me now, but anyway, but,
Thank God. Thank God.
but it was a time of really enforced silence. I felt it very much. And it's hard to grow out of that, because you're right. You haven't learned the techniques that a lot of people have, that are just basic problem solving techniques.
Exactly.
Have a conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. And the ramifications of that are of holding that inside. So you've actually got a whole dialogue going on inside of your head. You're not putting it out there, but it's still going on inside. And so and then all of the emotions that go along with that,
Right.
you're also keeping inside. So over time, that builds and builds, and who knows in what ways it's going to express itself in a negative way.
In a negative way, yeah, because sometimes it's anger. Like
Yeah.
I remember feeling very angry, and also resentful, which I think is somewhat of a similar emotion, but resentful, and also very rebellious.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
Try and find some way to express yourself that is not in the allowed kind of format. So you find this
Exactly.
kind of rebellion, because rebellion never really gets you anywhere, but it it has
but at least it's a release of some sort.
Yes.
And so the same with addictions. A lot of addictions, I think, come from that, because it allows you to express yourself. Like when I first started drinking, it gets rid of those inhibitions, and you're able to say what you wouldn't normally say, do what you wouldn't normally do, and express those feelings and thoughts in a not great way.
Yeah. But a release nonetheless.
But a release nonetheless, yes.
Well, and I think that you raise a really interesting point there, because when you internalize those things, it means that there is something going on in your body.
Yes.
Because when you have thoughts and you have feelings are actually a real thing in your body. And whether it's anger, or sometimes shame, or just disappointment, it's affecting everything in your body. And then we have ambivalence about that. Our ambivalence about that is also, I think, in a weird way, kind of self-esteem based also, because do we care enough about our body and our health to take care of the things that we're not saying? And we have ambivalence about that, because
yes.
it's
yes, it's a merry-go-round. And so yes, the health ramifications of that as well. And until you take care of the underlying issue, you're going to spend your whole life with all of these other issues. Because when I was researching, for this podcast, and I was researching ambivalence, I really came to realize that is me. And I really didn't know, I didn't have a word for it before.
Yeah.
I've come up with some things in my head, but actually after I read, quite a bit about this and stuff, I realized that it was ambivalence.
Yeah.
It made sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. And I think that, if you sort of keep digging away at the layers of it, because we have ambivalence about so many things, is that it seems to me that there is a piece of that we won't even choose ourselves. Like we'll choose to stay in the safe part rather than choosing ourselves, to be clear about what we want, to be okay with saying when we don't agree with something, or saying when we don't like something, and we'll hold back. We've got ambivalence about whether we'll do that or not, and in the end we're not choosing ourselves. I think at some level we have an understanding that it's not good for us.
Yes.
But do it anyway.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that's where ambivalence gets you by the neck, doesn't it? Because you're,
Chokes you like a chicken.
yeah, just well, and you think about that, that's kind of that fifth chakra, area as well, and where that symbolically is where you're speaking your truth and
Right, right. The throat chakra. Yeah.
releasing the energy in there and such. And so I think that's a really interesting dig. And the other thing that I found interesting was in like business deals with or tries to deal with ambivalence issues, because what they find in business is that, this, I think this was a Harvard, I might have even sent that to you, as a Harvard University study
Yes, you did. Yeah.
in 2019 or something like that. And what they looked at was what was the outcome of with employees who had high levels of ambivalence, and discovered that they were the least risk takers,
Mm-hmm.
and they were good employees, but they weren't great employees, because when they were offered the option to do something with a high degree of a potential for failure, they held back or tried to skirt around it or achieve it in a different way. And when they were given opportunities that required them to go into areas where they were not yet comfortable, they would decline. In terms of somebody would see they were doing some good work and say, well, we have a position in this department, and would you be interested? And they go, no, I'm pretty happy here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The safe zone.
Yes, and at that level of ambivalence, what was noted, of course, quickly, because we look at what do we call it sometimes, risk takers or ambition, or got a million names for it. But what is at the core of it? What is at the core of that ambivalence about moving out? And the research is really looking at what are these employees going to be like in business. And
Yes, I mean, as you're talking about that, I'm remembering a job that I had where there was a lot of employees, and the managers, assistant managers, supervisors were always on the lookout for employees that they thought they could, move into higher positions, more responsible and stuff like that. And so I kind of watched that and noted, I was never asked, but I always made sure that I kind of stayed in the background. I didn't, I'm not a risk taker. But I did notice the kind of people that they sought and they went after to promote and give more responsibility.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I think it's because they put themselves out there more. So, they're taking more risk. And it was noted by management. And then they would be the ones that would, carry on to promotions and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally get that. I had an experience of that I guess it was in the mid late 80s. I was working in an agency that was working downtown Calgary with elderly, and about I guess about midway into the amount of time I was there, I was approached to manage one of the buildings that housed the seniors. It was a bit more money, and it was kind of a bit more risky kind of job than the one that I was already doing, because you're more on the firing line with a lot of things. And I had a great deal of ambivalence. It took me weeks to decide, and to get out of the ambivalence. I never got out of it. I think the final decision that I made was that I was more comfortable where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to look at where the career route was with this, and the career route was about the same. It wasn't really that different, but it was the move and the kind of visibility and the position that I would be taking and stuff. And I was dying of ambivalence, which was really fear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
fear of, being in a job with a much higher profile and being seen or doing something
Yes.
wrong, or not being able to do the job. And it was torturous.
And
Uh,
did you end up taking it?
no,
Okay. Yeah.
no, I couldn't do it. And I thought about it a lot later and years later, and I realized what I had done was just, crapped out out of ambivalence, out of not being able
Yes.
to take that next step, which was to, like Susan Jeffers in, that book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yes. Yes.
I wish I'd read that book then, but I hadn't. But it was like that. I couldn't embrace the fear with any confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept moving around in that ambivalence, and finally I, just let it go.
So what do you think that for the people that are listening, what would be other words that would describe ambivalence? Because when I read this and I realized that that was something that I feel a lot, but up until now, I looked at it as, being weak or not having boundaries or all sorts of different things. So for people that are listening, that might be realizing that that's what they're feeling is ambivalence, what do you think other words would be that people would be describing themselves as feeling?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to look at the things that you're ambivalent about. And I've seen some good research, and some of it comes out of, therapeutic models and this sort of thing, is that you take that thing in front of you that you're ambivalent about, and you kind of have two sides of a paper. You say, what happens if I do this, and what happens if I don't do this? And you try to kind of drain the whole kind of energy out of what those two options are. Like, take them right to the end. If I take this,
Mm-hmm.
this and this and this, if I don't take this, all this and this and this, and then look at it and try to get a sense of what is the scary bit of this, and what is it that you think you can do or can't do, or that on this side of take, let's say it's a job, on the side of taking a job, and you see all of the things that you think it will bring or create for you, and you start to get anxious or start feeling really uncomfortable, you go there, because that's where all the gold is.
Yes. Yeah.
Where that fear is, that it's, I think, often unexamined.
Yeah.
And to look at it and to try and understand why it creates so much fear or anxiety, and what do you relate it to, and really kind of dig around in it, because 99% of the time it's old junk, old
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
messaging, old fears. Sometimes you know where they come from, sometimes you don't. And it kind of like kicks or triggers some of those things, which in the end may not have anything to do whether you could manage that decision or not. It's just that it
Yes.
brought up some fear. And so it brought up some fear, and you backed away from it before you even had a chance to look at it. So I think one of the things that I found that was really helpful is that you almost have to dissect it, the ambivalence, in a way to even identify what the two opposing forces are, because
Mm-hmm.
one will be negative, guarantee, and one will be positive. And so or have those aspects to it. But if you never really dig around and look at it, you'll just walk away from things time and time again, out of being uncomfortable with that feeling that comes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's that feeling. I'm out of here. I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to talk to that person, or I'm not going to try and resolve that, because I know exactly how this goes, and I've been there 100 times, and you react. And because you and I have talked about this a lot in the past, reacting to triggers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we stay in that neutral zone, like you call it, or that level of ambivalence, it's kind of a way of staying out of the triggers too.
Yes.
Because you know what they all are. And if you go too deep, there's going to be triggers there. If you go too far there, there'll be triggers there. So you sort of stay, you stay in that sort of zone where you're not triggered by all of these things.
But you make a good point about saying that's where the gold is. Like, because you're right. Because if you can go in there and dig,
Yeah.
as if you were digging for gold, that is where the gold, that is where the gold is.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
would you say that ambivalence is another word for anxiety?
No, but I think that ambivalence creates anxiety.
Okay. Okay. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, because I think when you like, I think when it's, you know, I often, to me, it's like a boat. You know, you get in the boat, and you know, it's a little bit stormy over that way, but you can't. There's a little foggy over that way, so you just won't go either way. So you're just sitting in the boat, you know, waiting for something to happen, really, almost. And
Yeah.
because there's fear and anxiety on both sides, you know, you just, well, I'm not doing that. You may feel you don't have the skills, or you don't have the resilience, or whatever you think it might take. And so you sit in the boat. And then after a while, you know, you're just, well, you're just sitting. What are you doing today? Oh, I'm sitting in the boat.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here enjoying the weather.
Sometimes
you have to make up an excuse why you're sitting there in the boat. You don't want to tell the truth.
So I would say that would be, I guess, my takeaway from all of this stuff, because I'm looking at this like you are, is that if we never look at the things that are, you know, creating the ambivalence, then we just stay in the boat.
Yes.
And after a while, you know, it's boring. And
yes.
and
Life is passing you by because you're afraid to get out of the boat.
Yeah.
And you know, you see examples. I've seen recently an example of someone that I know that was very ambivalent about confronting someone, and this person finally did, and was very it was very difficult, and there was some anxiety to go with it. But as time went by, the strength and the empowerment that came afterwards is just, you know, just a small piece of like encouragement and empowerment that will help that person go forward for the next time.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you're able to do that, I think if you're able to take that risk, I've seen you do it many times because we work together.
Yeah.
And I've very much admired a lot of times where I've seen you in uncomfortable situations, but because you don't like to carry that uncomfortableness, you deal with it. I've seen that. And
well,
yeah.
that's why therapy is important.
Yeah.
You know, because you said it in the beginning, that and this is maybe where we'll leave this, is you said, if you're not taught
Mm-hmm.
how to, in a safe environment.
Yes, important. That's important.
Very important. If you're not taught how to confront, or to express, or to just ask for things without fear,
Mm-hmm.
You're likely to go in the boat.
Yes. Yes.
And one of the things that I learned in therapy was a way to manage your anxiety when you have to say something that you're uncomfortable with, and to know that you can get through it. It's just, you know, that the fear that we feel is like the fear that we felt when we were a child. And
Mm-hmm.
we assume that it's still that scary because we've not done it as adults. So we don't know, you know, if we're going to get, you know, bopped in the back of the head, or somebody's going to, you know, yell at us, or, you know, reject us, or leave us, or all those things that we fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that you learn how to manage those things that were used to shut us down when we.
Yes. 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 You have to manage the aftermath.
Yes. And it's never as bad as you think it is.
Yeah. But it still lives in the body.
It lives in you, and it is all of the triggers that stop us from getting moving.
Yes.
Because, you know, it's.
Yes.
So what do you have any last sort of thoughts about this, as in terms of what you think, you know, would be a useful maybe tool for people, or just something encouraging, or
Well, I think probably just the awareness of it helps
yeah,
to know that, you know, that this is what you're dealing with.
yeah,
And just to be aware of what the ramifications have been because of it.
yes,
And then you have to make it, then I guess you have to decide, is it worth it? Was it worth it? Is there something that you can do about it?
yes,
I mean, there is.
yeah,
But at this late stage of the game, late stage of the game for me, I guess it's never too late. But I realized that throughout my life, I have been in many different ways trying to deal with it
yeah, yeah,
on many levels.
yeah, yeah,
And so it's just a matter of just being aware and then making the decision.
yeah, yeah. I agree with you, and I would also add that don't be afraid to get help,
Exactly.
because you didn't learn this by yourself, and sometimes you can't dig yourself out as easily by yourself as you can
Hmm.
who really knows a process and understands the kind of trauma in a way that was created around silencing people and putting them on the fence about so many things. And yeah, so what I think what we'll end with then is just that we'll do this again.
Okay.
Hope that there was something useful for people, because we always have fun.
Yes, we do.
Yes, because this idea, well, tell people where this idea came from.
Well, this idea came from, I think this is what you're referring to, is that we have coffee
Yeah.
and we sit for hours and talk and we have really good, interesting conversations. And over the years, we've actually said, this is before even podcasts were really that popular. You know, we should record this because, you know, I think a lot of people would get get something out of this. Is that what you were referring
That's
to?
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so that's like, okay, well, let's say goodbye to people,
Okay.
and we'll see them next time.
All right. Will do. Sounds good.